President Donald Trump addressed the nation last night, primarily talking about strategies for Afghanistan and South Asia. ABC News Political Director Rick Klein joins us now to talk about last night's speech and the current economic climate. President Trump talked a lot about giving America's enemies, not giving them our plans or timetable for attacks. Rick, so how did you take his speech last night? He talked a lot about not building nations, but focusing on killing terrorists.
I think it was a strong speech in terms of the messaging. I think in terms of the actual content, it's going to be hard to judge the results because he's not talking about timetables. He's not talking about troop levels. Also striking here is this is a major reversal for the president. He was unequivocal during the campaign as a private citizen. He wanted to end the war in Afghanistan. He even said last night that his initial instinct was to wind down that war. But now he is doubling down, putting more resources into this war and taking ownership of it like he hasn't before.
Is it logical to think that we don't have to build nations, though, that we can really just focus on dealing with the terrorists at this point?
I think clearly the United States has not understood the mission in Afghanistan and probably hasn't understood the people of Afghanistan either. And I think the idea of nation building, of course, it polls very poorly and people will talk, as Donald Trump has, about needing to build the United States before you worry about other countries. But it is actually integral to the United States mission. If you want to have a lasting impact, you have to make sure that there's a stable and functioning society when you leave. So it gets complicated around the edges. I think in terms of a slogan, in terms of a goal, it certainly makes sense. But in terms of the practice, there are a lot of ways to win a war, and you don't just do it with troops on the ground. You don't just do it with firepower.
Okay, Rick, so the White House seems a bit of a mess from outsiders. A lot of people coming and going. The latest Stephen Bannon seems like a little bit of a distraction here when we're dealing with some of these serious issues like North Korea. What are we as Americans supposed to make of all of this that we see happening in the White House administration?
Well, the chaos is real, and I think when it matters is when decision-making is impacted. And I think you saw the internal staff turmoil play out in the Afghanistan decision, for right or for wrong. The president ended up siding with his national security team, including H.R. McMaster, against Steve Bannon. Bannon's now on the outside. His Breitbart website is blasting away at the president's decision. And I think you saw an emblematic of the problem last week, how he responded to Charlottesville. It seemed like no one was able to give him the kind of straightforward advice that would put him in a better spot on this. And he was all over the map and landed in a place with that press conference last week at Trump Tower that even his closest allies weren't comfortable with. So I think it's an important time for this White House. He's back in Washington after this extended summer break, trying to reset things with this new staff. They've got a complicated agenda for the fall, and they need to put the staff turmoil behind them.
Is that possible on a day like today when President Trump is in Arizona, but the Republican governor has said he will not attend the rally today? Protests expected there in the city. Is it possible to bring this country together under President Trump?
Well, the president said last night that he wanted to, but he's going to be testing his own words with his own appearance in Arizona. There are all those complicated local issues, as you mentioned. He may even be pardoning the controversial former sheriff, Joe Arpaio, while he's there. So there's so many different cross currents that he is thrusting himself in the middle of. And it seems kind of vintage Trump that when he sees a conflagration, he throws more gas on the fire. It'll be interesting to see if he dials things back a bit.
Yeah, definitely interesting to watch him. He is a president who has quite a track record when it comes to the business world. Do you think he's going to be able to take that business success and bring that to the White House and help us as a country move forward?
It's a critical question, and I think it was important to understanding his appeal. Last week, of course, he saw many of his business allies abandon him. It seems like the stock market still is on board for the Trump presidency. They like what they've seen in terms of deregulations. But the rubber hits the road, I think, this fall, because you've got a budget bill, you've got a debt ceiling, you've got a whole range of fiscal issues that come to the president's desk. How he handles them and how he handles Congress around them, just as important as any kind of business cheerleading that he's engaged in.
ABC News Political Director Rick Klein joining us this afternoon. Thanks for your perspective, Rick. We really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.